It's so nice to see you. Today, in our series about the reigning king, we've come to the King of all nations, and we're going to be learning about when Peter met Cornelius. But just before we do, I've got some pictures I'd like you to think about. Take a few seconds to look at each one, and Luke and Ariana are here to do the same thing, and they're going to tell us what they think they are, and you have a think if you agree with them. So, this is the first picture. Have a look, Luke and Ariana. Have a look, everyone else. What can you see?
I can see a duck and a rabbit.
You can see both. Okay, very good. So on there we had a duck. You can see the beak going upwards, or that beak can also be the ears. So you can see either. Now, how about this one? What can you see here?
I can see a young lady.
You can see a young lady. Ariana, can you see the young lady? Not see anything else? There's also an old woman there. If you take a really careful look, you can see there's an old woman. Now, the next one. Have a look at this. What can you see here?
I can see a dog. Yeah.
A dog, do you agree, Ariana?
Yes.
There's also a man. If you follow the ear, you can see that there is a man's face there too. Now, the last one. This one may look obvious, but it's not quite as obvious as you think. What can you see?
I can see an elephant. Hey, and a dolphin.
Yes, there's actually up to 16 different things in there. So have a really quick look and see how many other animals you can see. What can you see, Ariana?
I can see an elephant, a donkey, a dog, a cat, and a mouse.
And
I can also see...
So if you look at this slide,
a snake.
You can see the different animals that are there. So there's even a fish in the eye. Apparently there's a beaver at the top.
Yeah.
There's a hen. There's a donkey and the cat. They're quite obvious. There's a swordfish and even a snake in the tail. Those pictures highlight that what we first see isn't always all there is to see. There is more to most things than that which first meets the eye. And in today's story, Peter finds that Jesus' message is for people he never thought it would be for. So let's have a look at the story. Peter and Cornelius. This comes from Acts 10. Peter was visiting the scattered groups of Christians. They loved to hear him talking about Jesus. At Joppa, Peter stayed with a leather worker called Simon in a house by the sea. A few miles away at Caesarea, Cornelius had his house. He was a soldier in the Roman army, a captain in the Italian regiment. Cornelius admired the Jews and their God. How different he was from the gods of Rome. Cornelius did all he could to help the poor, and he said his prayers every day. But he wasn't a Jew. He could never hope to be one of God's people. Then, one afternoon, an angel came to him. God has heard your prayers, he said. There is a man called Peter staying at Joppa. Send for him. He has something God wants you to hear. And he told Cornelius where Peter was staying. At noon the next day, Peter was on the flat roof of Simon's house praying. He was glad of the shade of the big awning. He could smell the food cooking and he felt hungry. He closed his eyes. Someone was letting down a big sheet. It was held like the awning by the corners. In it were all kinds of creatures, birds and animals. Some of them were on the list of unclean foods that no Jew would eat. God's law forbade it. Now, I don't know if you've heard about that before, but in Deuteronomy, God told the Jews, his people, specifically what they could and couldn't eat. So food that was unclean, I've got a picture for you, food that was unclean, and food that they were allowed to eat. So they were allowed to eat sheep and cows and chickens, but they weren't allowed to eat, for example, pork or crabs. And this would have been something that Peter followed all his life. He would never have eaten any of the forbidden food. And there are also other laws about who you could mix with. So he would never have had someone who wasn't a Jew stay in his house, for example. So that's why this was quite shocking to him. Get up, said a voice. Kill and eat. Oh, I can't do that. Those creatures are unclean. Don't say anything is unclean if God says it is clean. 3 times this happened, and Peter knew that this dream was a message from God. But what did it mean? At that moment, Cornelius' men knocked at the door. When Peter met Cornelius, he understood God's message. The good news about Jesus wasn't just for the Jews, it was for everyone. Cornelius had invited all his friends and neighbours to hear Peter speak. It doesn't matter what country you're from, Peter said. God treats everyone alike. And he told them all about Jesus. When Peter had finished, God sent his Spirit. It was like the day of Pentecost all over again. This story shows us that the good news of Jesus is for people of every language, every nationality, and every culture. It's for young and old, rich and poor, good and evil. We are all sinners in the eyes of God, and when Jesus died on the cross, he died for all of us. It takes great courage to speak up for Jesus, but when we do, God can transform individuals, families, and entire nations.